In the early hours of the morning, a saturated Mindy and Mork are already feeding their chicks, which produces the first fecal sack of the day. Welcome back to the 2021 Nestbox series. So as you can see, it was a wet start to the 28th. Mindy and Mork are absolutely saturated. You can see just how wet they are when they're coming in and out with food, but thankfully the food does keep coming in and out. Some people in the comments were asking where do they find the time to feed themselves? And that is a very good question. I do see them the odd time feeding on the feeders in the garden. And that would be definitely just for themselves, as they don't feed the chicks solid food like that. So I would think, other than stopping off at the local bird feeder, I would imagine if they're hungry they would just take the little morsel of food that they're finding themselves. A saturated Mindy there, keeping her chicks warm. And the chicks seem to be getting a little darker every day also. It isn't so much that their skin is darkening, it's more like the feathers are just starting to form in the skin before protruding out. And these chicks' rate of growth seems to be going really well, and not surprisingly. We see Mork here bringing in a lovely mouthful of food, followed by a lovely sequence of both of them feeding the chicks. But we know our Mork doesn't wait around. He's straight out there looking for more food for his precious chicks. They really are doing an exceptional job, these two. We just saw Mork leave there, and I've purposely left this little sequence uncut. As Mindy decides to clean out the nest and make sure everything is in working order down below, Mork is going to come back in under a minute. Just watch him arrive now. And that is commonplace for Mork. He really is putting in an amazing effort. We seem to see some fat from some fat balls coming in. I do feed the birds some fat balls, but these ones are definitely not mine. And in the coming videos and days, you will see a lot of this being brought in, and it seems to do the chicks quite well. I have been told in the past that anything not live for the chicks is potentially bad, but the fat that these birds seem to be bringing in aren't doing any harm to the chicks at all. But they do thankfully continue to bring in loads of live food also, which is without a doubt the best option for the chicks. I recall years ago watching the story of a rescued BLUETIT's nest. And these people were rearing these chicks, and what they were feeding them was mealworms. And they were keeping the chicks alive and well on these mealworms. But as the chicks grew older, they noticed something quite unusual. I don't know if any of you know what a BLUETIT fledgling looks like, but they kind of look like the adult birds, except more of just a yellow hue. And their hand-reared chicks actually turned out grey. So for them to develop the proper pigments, they need the proper food. I thought this was amazing, as it meant the mealworms, while keeping the chicks alive and well, they obviously didn't have the correct pigment in them to allow them to get to the required colour. And I would guess that the green caterpillars are ideal for getting them the correct nutrients and energy to develop correctly. And this brings us to the end of the 28th, and the end of another good day for the chicks. And Mindy doing her final checks on the nest before trying to settle down. It seems to be getting trickier and trickier to sit on these chicks. Like trying to put a load of young kids to bed. And so that brings us to the 29th. We see that the chicks have got a little darker yet again. But just watch here, you get a view of what looks to be one of the younger chicks. That one doesn't seem to be as near as developed as some of the bigger ones. Mindy gets a fright from a crow or rook here. Thankfully, it doesn't amount to anything, and a few minutes later, Mork is in with some food to let her know that the coast is all clear. Sometimes the chicks are so far under the nest that you don't actually see them. I wonder, is this intentional, as any predator looking in the nesting hole really wouldn't be able to see those chicks at all. It really does look to be a cozy nest. And thankfully the food just kept coming in this morning for these chicks. Mindy and Mork are really getting into the swing of things. And actually getting to see quite a lot of each other as they're sometimes in the nest together. You can see that sometimes the chicks are so far under the nest that when the parents come in, they hit their heads off the roof of the nest. Once they don't get stuck down there, it all should be okay. She sometimes goes down and shuffle the chicks about just like she used to do when she used to turn the eggs. I often wonder, is this to mix around the chicks and maybe take a smaller chick that may have been buried down at the bottom back up to the top in hope to get it some food? Again, just one of my own opinions. But it feels like it would make sense. As older chicks, if they had their way, would always sit at the top. And no, these chicks aren't about to sing a duet. They are getting very warm in there. It was one of the warmer days on the 29th, and the nest box is getting a little bit hot in the middle of the evening. And that's what the chicks do when they're very warm. They begin to pant. And we'll see more of that in the coming days as there's some good weather on the way. They also try their best to get away from the other chicks when they're warm like this. And by the end of the day, the chicks are really lively. And they're getting much more lively in the nest and trying to move around a little bit more freely themselves. This is just a minute or two sped up just to show you their movement in the nest. And this is one of the few times today that you actually see the 6th chick there, just momentarily. So, by the end of the 29th, we have all 6 chicks still alive and counted for. And with Mork and Mindy bringing in plenty of food constantly and keeping the nest good and clean, things are looking good for these chicks. Mindy, on the other hand, is finding it harder and harder to get comfortable sitting on top of them, and that's not surprising. This is a growing family and they are continuously getting more and more restless. And so with that, I will leave it there. Thank you so much as always for watching. I'm going to leave you watching Mindy bedding down for the night. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again. Bye bye.